One of the biggest downfalls of the Commander community is the lack of acceptance for land destruction. Single target versus mass land destruction has no differentiation. A lot of people just like to have their resources with them, even though it's really holding them back. And no, it's not just Field of the Dead running away with the game. A lot of people don't understand that a ramp spell or two is really actually pushing them back in terms of advantage because the other player is getting ahead with those extra lands. And so keeping things even is very important. But what happens when your opponent's not necessarily ramping per se, but just playing a lot of lands turn after turn in the sense of landfall triggers? Should we be looking at mass land destruction for that? With many things, it's nuanced. It's a multifaceted situation, and that's what I wanted to explore in today's video. A Reddit post went over a situation where someone came up with a landfall deck against the table, and the table came up to a very weird conclusion as to how to deal with it. In your opinion, does playing landfall circumvent a general understanding of no mass land removal? Our pod got into it last night. For context, I was playing a landfall deck with Aranus Gloomstalker with Street Urchin as my background. This usually isn't terribly oppressive on its own. However, my buddy was playing Kibo Uktaba Prince and giving me all these bananas, treasures. The side effect was I ended up with as much mana and items to sack as I needed to snipe away a lot of the board state. Needless to say, a couple of people got pretty salty. Now, before we go too far into it, let's provide some context to these. Let's go over to the cards. So, Kibo Uktaba Princess, green and 2 for a 2/2 legendary creature, Monkey Noble. Tap it, each player creates a colorless artifact token named Banana. With tap, sacrifice this artifact, create a red or a green, you gain 2 life. So it's like a weird hybrid of a treasure token. Whenever an artifact an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control that's an ape or a monkey. Whenever Kibo attacks, defending player sacrifices an artifact. So you kind of grow a board, a little bit of group hug stuff, like random stuff, right? So you might be forcing your opponent to sacrifice some treasures, some artifacts, whatever it is. But regardless, the artifacts are important because when it comes to Aranus Gloomstalker, Aranus says whenever Aranus Gloomstalker attacks, return a land from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you might be able to recur fetch lands, return them. That's where the landfall aspect comes from. But choose a background. You can have a background as a second commander. So background, they chose Street Urchin, which is a legendary enchantment background that says commander creatures you own have 1, sacrifice another creature or an artifact. So this is where they're able to use the bananas themselves. This creature deals 1 damage to any target. And that's what they're talking about, pinging out the whole board. It's a very unique situation where they were able to take advantage of that. Now, after some discussion, one of the salty heads presented the idea that the landfall mechanic falls outside of our general consensus of not playing mass land removal, mostly because it doesn't allow an opportunity to break what's happening. He's also the person okay with meandering into CDH, which most of us don't want to do. So a more spiky player kind of making a call for, does landfall, as they see here, does landfall take advantage of our rules against mass land removal? Should playing landfall decks allow the pod to play mass land removal to stop them? This is a multifaceted thing, right? So you have to remember, where do mass landfall decks get their takes from, right? So they are ramping, they are playing lands that give you 2 lands, so fetch lands, whether that be something as powerful as a Misty Rainforest or just something like a Terramorphic Expanse or a Fabled Passage that generally gets a basic. You're taking advantage of multiple lands, entering through spells or through fetch lands, and you are either indirectly or directly enabling some type of landfall from the original Zendikar set strategy. The problem is that mass land destruction, or even removal generally deals with lands that are on the battlefield. The problem with landfall is that it triggers on creatures where a land enters. It doesn't really care about the land already being there. And so the effect is already had. So the removal part of it doesn't really matter. And honestly, if you were to destroy all the lands, a lot of these decks actually have ways to just come back anyway. And this is where I wanted to take a little bit of a side note here, because a lot of these decks do actually have good ways to return cards from their graveyard. And I want to actually highlight that. I think a lot of people just think about like Crucible of Worlds, but there are actually a lot of cards that return lands from graveyards. And I might miss like a couple here. So let me know in the comment section down below, what am I missing from this list? So firstly, Crucible of Worlds, the age-old classic, you may play lands from your graveyard. Next up, we have Walk-in Closet, which is an enchantment room. The first part of it is you may play lands from your graveyard, so that's great. Next up is Conduit of Worlds. This is a personal favorite of mine. I have it in one of my commander decks. You may play lands from your graveyard, and then you can tap choose non-land permanent card in your graveyard. If you haven't cast a spell this turn, you may cast that card. If you do, you can't cast additional spells this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. So what you can do is, kind of activate it as a sorcery. If you haven't cast any spells this turn, you may cast that card. And so this is a great way, just like if you're empty-handed or if you just want to cast something big, maybe you milled something over through some self-mill shenanigans and you want to get something out of your graveyard and you have a bunch of instants in your hand, so you don't care about casting something this turn. You have more cards to cast on your opponent's turn. Conduit of Worlds is a great artifact for that. Perennial Behemoth is a really fun one because you're able to unearth it. So if you needed to play out multiple lands, you can, if this gets removed, it's a 2/7, but if it gets removed because it's an artifact creature, you may play lands from your graveyard. Ancient Green Warden is a classic one. If a land entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, triggers an additional time, and then you may play lands from your graveyard. Titania Nature's Force is very specific because it says you may play forests from your graveyard, but that kind of makes sense. If you have Titania as your commander, then you would only really be playing forests, but regardless, you only can get those. Whenever an elemental you control dies, you may mill 3 cards, and whenever a forest you control enters, create a 5/3 elemental. So it just kind of cycles over and over and over again. You're able to just kind of create your graveyard as an extension of the hand. Harrow is a fun one. As additional cast to cast a spell, sacrifice a land, search a library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield. This was an example of so a card that not only gets you multiple cards, but puts another card into your graveyard in a situation where it might be hard to do so. If you don't have your fetches, this is a great way to put a card into your graveyard to get a land drop, so you get 2 landfall triggers. Then if you have a Crucible of Worlds, you're then able to play from your graveyard, put it out. Another one is going to be Aftermath Analyst. This is like 6 mana in total, but when it enters, mill 3 cards, sacrifice this creature, return all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield. This one's insane because if you're able to just get this out after mass land destruction, maybe you have some artifacts, some ramp, whatever it is, artifact-based ramp, maybe some creature-based mana as well, then Aftermath Analyst is a great way to just, nope, I have them all back. Scare Tiller is a fun one whenever it becomes tapped. So if you use Scare Tiller for like Convoke shenanigans, this is a great way to get that back as well. So you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped, or so you can cheat one out, or you can get a land from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Again, Scare Tiller with Convoke shenanigans is a really fun one. And this is actually a really cool group hug one. So this one I actually had in a version of my Feldergriff deck. Put all basic land cards from all graveyards into play under their owner's control taps. So this was a great way to punish these like 3+ color decks that didn't play enough basics. And so you can mass land removal, look at the other players and be like, yo, let this go through. You'll get your lands back, but we can stop that one player. Right? And so in pods where you are generally okay with this and things like this happen, if you have the Rule 0 conversation, Planar Birth is like a fun one. But it's not like, are you using this in Landfall shenanigans? No, I just wanted to bring it up. But regardless, let's go back to solving Landfall, right? So when it comes to beating Landfall, the first comment gets it off the rip. My serious and non-rhetoric question is, does mass land really affect the Landfall player more than the other? Or is it the other way around? Exactly, because it affects that Landfall player, yes, because they already have the lands they have and played. That's why they run Armageddon in their Landfall decks. It's a genuine win con for me. I'm able to rebuild at blinding speed to end the game, while others are trying to figure out their next step. It does put a clock on the field because if Armageddon resolves, I'm targeted. So either way, I progress the game state to some dismay. I always warn that I have Armageddon in my deck, and I like the way of thinking when it comes to this. You are probably playing some amount of mana rocks, some amount of advancement, and you're able to play out more ramp spell, play out that analyst and get back all your lands, and then just kind of go off from there with a bunch of landfall triggers to be able to win from there. So how do we actually stop landfall strategies in Commander? Now, firstly, it's got to be with politics. When you see the landfall commander and when you see the Crucible hit, when you see certain cards hit, you have to be the one to speak up. right? You have to be the one to give a reasonable argument as to why. I think a lot of people fall into the trap of a threat entering the battlefield and they're like, I don't know, I don't like that. That's not good enough. Speak up, give reason, because a lot of times, I think a lot of times people are used to just having a good time and, you know, just like going with the vibes, which is fine. But then the game runs away from them and they're not feeling good. They feel like everything was too fast, and that's because they weren't paying attention. You know, you can't control how other people react, but you can control how you've informed the game. And so if those people are not aware, they're just having fun, they're like, ah, that's nothing. No. You point out, wait a second, look at that activated ability on the analyst that actually returns all lands from their graveyard. Why would they want to do that? They're just going to mill themselves. So how about you point some graveyard hate removal at them, or remove their commander or something, like stop them, slow them down. And so having that conversation once key pieces come out is important. Obviously you don't need to just necessarily target them down, but just like pointing that out in the table is key. It's not just about a landfall card that just gains +2/+2 whenever a land enters. If it has no evasion, whatever, you know what I mean? But when it comes to big pieces that recur, that, you know, they'll have that rule zero conversation of, can I play Armageddon in my bracket 3 table here? They're going to have that conversation with you, but all the players may not know all cards, especially with so many cards entering Commander these days. It's very common that you don't know every card off the top of your head. Like, oh, let me read that, let me see that. So just pointing that out for other people to make them aware, for those people that are just like, I'm not going to read all that. It's going to be very important for that. Now, in terms of specific cards, Confounded Conundrum is a fun one. When it enters, you draw, so it replaces itself. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if that player had another land enter already, they return a land they control to its owner's hand. Now, a lot of people can think about this like enabling the landfall player, allowing them to return lands, but if they're trying to ramp, then this is going to be a great way to stop them. Obviously, if like 2-3 lands come into play at the same time, like I'm thinking there's like that Ent card from Lord of the Rings. It's like if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you can actually put 3 lands into play. So it doesn't really stop that. Like they're still up on lands, but it's something to start off with. Land Equilibrium is a good one. If an opponent who controls at least as many lands as you would put a land onto the battlefield, that player instead puts that land onto the battlefield, then sacrifices a land. So this one better stabilizes against larger amounts of ramp. You also have Leon or Arbiter, because a lot of times these decks are going to be searching and ramping. So Leon and Arbiter against something as simple as like an early turn 2 ramp spell, turn 3 ramp spell, is going to be able to stop them. Generally, they're not going to be able to pay the 2 to be able to stop this, and it's an extra tax. We see this so many times with other tax effects. A lot of times people just stop playing the tax, especially early game. They can't afford to. It's a great piece. Ashiok Dreamrender is like lights out. You have to specifically be in Dimir X for it, but spells and abilities your opponent's control can't cause them to search their library. So if it's a spell that's ramping, if it's an ability of a land that's ramping, or searching the library, they're not going to be able to do it. So again, in instances with fetch lands where they're grabbing multiple lands, triggering multiple landfalls, then they're not going to be able to do that. Ashiok doubles up in the sense of removing their graveyard as well, but also it's nice graveyard hate because it hits each opponent. So it's like randomly good in so many different small ways, because it's not just targeting the landfall player. It's also like, hey, I'm also exiling this person's graveyard as well. So that also means something while y'all can't search. So yeah, it's not just anti-landfall. It's also like pretty good graveyard hate, because you can target yourself to mill cards if you're a graveyard deck, but then exile the graveyards of just your opponent. There's a lot of tricky things you can do with Ashiok Dreamrender. Polluted Bonds is a fun one. Very overcosted though. Black and 3 for an enchantment. Whenever a land enters for an opponent, any land, there's not like a bare minimum count. They lose 2 life and you gain 2 life. This one's actually really big. I like that you do gain life and it triggers for each opponent. So this over time, you don't have to like enchant this onto a player like a curse. It works for all of them. You're just going to be able to gain a lot of life over time. Zozu is a cool one that you can just put right into the command zone. This triggers for each player though, so it's going to trigger for you. It's going to be a rather aggressive deck as well. Usually it's like added as a prison piece. It's just like a fun little goblin piece as well. Like if you're playing goblin typal, you have ways to search for this. This is a great like random matron target if you should need it, but again, one that could go in the command zone if you wanted to go that crazy with it. And that's where I ultimately land in some random pieces that I know can deal with landfall decks as I've dealt with them in the past. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I personally, again, do not believe mass land removal is the way to stop landfall, but maybe I'm missing something. Let me know if you feel like there are ways to do that. Maybe I'm missing something about mass land removal. Let me know what your favorite anti-landfall card is in general, and what is your favorite way to tackle landfall in your games of EDH.